I wanted to tell about when I was in high school. My father got a job working at a home for delinquent boys, and it was in the country out in the San Fernando Valley in California. And we went out there, and this was I went to a country school, but the home for the boys was the important thing in my life. I kept score for the baseball games. I played the piano for their musical events, and we lived on the campus, so I found out what was going on. And it was a social work kind of enterprise, and my mother and father were both involved in this, and I became interested in being a social worker, working with people, and that was an important event in my life. So after that, what could I do? Went to college and became a social worker, right? So when I went to skip over now to when I came to D.C., I thought this was a beautiful place, but I liked it particularly because it was a mix of people. It wasn't just all stuffy white people. It was a mix of people. And I thought, this is wonderful. This is just what I like. So one of the early things that happened was I was invited out to dinner. We were talking to the people, and they said, River Park, this is River Park. We came to River Park. They said, River Park is going to be 25 years old pretty soon. We should have a celebration. So we started talking about what should be in the celebration. And I had some ideas about it. So the people at the dinner said, well, Margaret, why don't you be the chair of the committee to plan the 25th anniversary? So I said, okay. Is this all right? Mm-hmm. So I started to get a committee together, and I got a lot of people together. We started learning about River Park, and I found out that this whole area where River Park is was the urban renewal area. It used to be working people lived here. They had some alley dwellings that were not very good, but they had all kinds of businesses too, the wharfs and brick building and all kinds of jobs. And of course the water business that came from the river. This was a major port. So started learning more about this, and I decided what we need to have was we need to learn about the history. The people in the Southwest here needed to learn about what used to be here before all these new buildings. So I started reading up stuff, and we had a big celebration over a weekend. On Friday night, we opened with pictures and a lecture at the Hirshhorn. We had a man working on our program who worked for the Smithsonian, so we could make use of the Smithsonian facilities. We had on Saturday, we had at Christ Methodist Church, we had a series of 4 different hourly lectures. We got some of the people who had been the developers of the land. We had we published a little booklet about what the history of River Park had been, and of the urban renewal area, the whole area. We learned a great deal about what had gone on before. One of the ones that was the most interesting was a man named Jim Banks. Now, it turned out that when they decided to do urban renewal here, there were all kinds of houses, little houses, a lot of them, but some not so little. They were bigger and very nice houses. But they decided they should all be wiped out. So Jim Banks was hired by the city to find new homes for all the people whose homes were being wiped out from under them. Now, he did it in later years. Another man did a study of the people who were left, who were still here, but the people who had been moved away, he found them all, or a lot of them. And his study showed that they were all of them in better housing, but the thing they missed the most was a sense of community. Here they had felt so free and welcome. They were able to go out their door and call the neighbor, please watch the pot on my stove. One woman told me that she, for example, when she was in junior high school, used to take her mother's clothesline and round up a lot of little kids and tie them around the waist so they wouldn't get lost, and walk up to the mall, to the museums, take the children to the museums. So there was interaction, there were people doing things for others, and there was a sense of community that everybody belonged. So that turned out to be, in my mind, the important thing. And the hope was that somehow, by having people learn about the how things used to be, and learn about what had gone on before, that it would encourage them to be concerned now and become interested in participating to make it a better place for those who are here now. My husband got a job teaching at Cornell University in Ithaca, New York, after he finished graduate school. And I had a master's degree in social work by that time. So we lived in Ithaca. We lived in Ithaca for 4 years, and finally it got to the point where they retired us. We reached the age to be retired. So we said, what are we going to do? And by that time we had been doing some research and had come down to Washington, and we were so happy to be in Washington because you didn't have to be born here to have people willing to listen to you and to let you help out. In Ithaca, I must say, I ran for mayor, and people would come to me and say, why aren't you home with your children? Well, at that time, my grandchildren were running around with T-shirts that said, Grandma for Mayor. So this is the thing. You had to be born in Ithaca to have any place. So Washington, D.C. was wonderful. People come and go here. And so we came, and we thought we would work in policy. We thought we would help out on the aging. That's what we were going to study and do. So we came for 3 months every year for about 5 years, and go back to Ithaca for the summer, and then come back to Washington. Every time we came, we lived in a different part around Washington. We lived at Forestville, we lived out in Virginia, we lived at Georgetown, we lived in different places. So we had a chance to try out different places in Washington. And finally we met Perry Klein, if you want to know. And he goes around, he has the cable company, so he was going around from one building to another, and he saw this listing for a sublet every winter. So for 3 years we came to Southwest and lived in one of the buildings up here. But then at the end of that time we had met people from River Park, And we came down, had dinner here once, and we enjoyed the people. We thought this is a great place. So when we were ready to come and be residents, Southwest was where we chose to go. That's what happened.
What year was that, Margaret?
That was 87.
87. And the 25th anniversary that you speak of, was that in 1990?
1988.
1988. So
Yeah.
River Park was completed in 1963.
63, right. So I was 25 years old, and we thought it was time to celebrate. So let's see. Then after that, they asked me to be the president of the Southwest Neighborhood Assembly. This is an important thing. I said, well, I've never even been to a meeting. And they said, well, it doesn't matter. So I said, well, all right, I'll do it. So I decided that if I was going to be the president, I ought to know what was in the neighborhood. So I went around to all the churches and talked to the people, and to the Southwest Neighborhood House, and to the clinic, and the other places, to find out what was going on in Southwest. If I was going to be the president of the assembly, it seemed to me I should know what was going on. So I did learn a great deal and met a lot of people, and resolved at that time that my goal was to bring both sides together. People said it's not so much racial division in here, it's economic. So it was important that we get to know everybody and encourage everybody to participate. So that's how that started.
Tell us a little bit about the Neighborhood Assembly.
Neighborhood Assembly has been going since '63. There had been, when the neighborhood became habitable again, after they wiped everything out, there was a black civic organization and a white. And Neil Pierce is one of those, and another was Joseph Curtis. Those were the two heads of the two organizations. Neil Pierce told me about how he and a small group of people sat up in an apartment looking down out onto the Southwest, and they decided what we need to do is have something to bring everybody together. They decided to join, and they did, and they joined those two organizations into one, and they didn't want to have a black and a white. They wanted to be all of us, all together. So that was the beginning of the Neighborhood Assembly in '63.
What was the name of the black organization?
One was the Civic Association, one was the Citizens Association. They were very close, but
and so they merged in 1963?
Yes, and made the Neighborhood Assembly. There was everybody in together.
Do you know when those organizations started?
I don't know the history of those organizations, no. I think the Neighborhood Assembly, I mean the white one, was, started when the neighborhood got put together here. Now, the good thing about Southwest was that when it was rebuilt, it was supposed to be the people who were in charge said it's got to be open occupancy. So Capitol Park, which is now Potomac Park, was the first building that opened, and they insisted, the people insisted, Jim Banks among others, it had to be mixed open occupancy. So that was set for the neighborhood, and that's the way it's remained ever since.
You're talking about 800 4th Street?
Yes.
There were no restrictive covenants in Southwest?
As I understand it, not.
Do you ever remember any history of redlining or anything like that?
Not. That was the point. It was to be open occupancy for everybody. That's an important ingredient.
Do you remember how the neighborhood was rebuilt? I always have a hard time figuring this out. Just what was demolished first, what was rebuilt first?
Oh, no.
I know that Westminster Church has a cornerstone that says 1965, but we found some photographs from 1962 where the building was under construction, and in the background was the Methodist Church, and that's about it. There wasn't anything else there.
The people planning in the Southwest, there were two schemes. One was to wipe everything out. Another was to selectively go. The decision was made to wipe everything out, and they knocked down all the churches within this area as well. And they decided that they, in their mind, decided how many churches were needed and built those. They built the 4 main churches: St. Dominic's, Westminster, Baptist, Riverside Baptist, and the Methodists, and then the Lutherans. So there were 5. That's the way it was. They decided that would cover the waterfront.
But St. Augustine's Episcopal Church, that was a new church, was it not?
I don't know the history beyond that.
I think it was organized in 1960.
That's very possible.
Or 62. Yeah.
But the thing that happened one time when I was here, I wanted to get a notice out to all the people in the churches. So I sat down here in the lobby as people went to church. I'd say, would you please take these flyers to your church? Well, I was really astonished to see what happened. Turned out that a lot of people didn't go to churches in the neighborhood. They went every place else. And then a lot of people came into the churches who had been someplace else. So at that time there was a big switch of people in terms of their church affiliation. But some people stuck to their old churches. And I was always surprised that the neighborhood people would go everywhere. The ones remaining here are the Second Baptist, Friendship Baptist, Baptist Second Union, is it?
Yes.
And Caron, and then St. Vincent's.
Right.
So that's what happened to the churches. And the schools, of course, there when the neighborhood started up again, there was Syphax School. Then there was Syphax was built in 1902 and named for a man named William Syphax, who was had married into the Syphax family. Do you know the history of them?
No. Tell us a little bit.
Martha Washington was from the Custis family, isn't that correct?
Yes.
And she had a grandson who sowed a few oats. And he had a family with a Marie, I believe. And she had a son with a new husband named Syphax. The Syphax, she married into the Syphax family. That family still exists over in Virginia. There's a psychiatrist, Syphax, and the family does get together occasionally. The other, he married Mary as well, this man, and his child is the house at Ty Brown,
Oh, yeah, the Law's house.
Law House.
Yeah.
That girl married Thomas Law,
Oh, yeah.
and there's a pictures of the two of them on the walls in that building.
This girl was a Syphax or
No, she was a Custis.
a Custis?
So she was of the Custis family, but Syphax was also the Custis family.
The Syphax family then was prominent in Southwest?
They were known.
They lived here?
I don't know about that. I have in my materials, I have the whole genealogy, Syphax family. It goes way back.
Tell us about Anthony Bowen.
I really don't know much about Anthony Bowen. We have up there in the office, a National Geographic map of 1948 that shows all the schools and the churches, not all the churches, but many of the churches that were here in Southwest. And there were 2 Bowen schools. Anthony Bowen, though, was a slave who had bought his freedom, and he turned out to be a wonderful philanthropist. You know that he started the first YMCA, black YMCA, for the city of Washington. And he also had he had a school, but there was another school also, brother or somebody. But Anthony Bowen also was a safe house and would meet people who were coming north from the Underground Railway. So he would start them on their way north when they came on the boat.
Was that here in this neighborhood?
Yes, just up on our hill where the Banneker.
Was that right? That
Yeah.
hill?
Yeah.
That's
Banneker
where it was.
Hill. He lived up on Banneker Hill.
Right up off the wharf.
Yeah. You know, I've got to stop.
Sure.
I've got to go.
Before we go on, tell us what you know about the other schools. Margaret Amadon. In your research, did you ever come across
I think Margaret Amadon was a woman from the north who was excited about being a teacher, and she thought she'd come down to the south and teach the black children. They weren't, she thought, getting enough education. But she started someplace else, and then they moved her here. You know that Amadon School was a magnet school?
Mm-hmm. I'd heard that.
Yeah.
And what year was that built?
In 62, I think 64.
Okay.
Like that.
So that didn't exist before?
No, that was definitely built as part of the urban renewal.
Okay. But Bowen preceded renewal.
Bowen was 48 maybe, or somewhere around there. Then they added a part onto that. But Bowen was, was already here.
What about the Randall School?
The Randall School was during the time of segregated housing, segregation. It was the black junior high school, and Jefferson was the white. And Randall was, the sign on the wall over there is something like 43 or something. Now, in just recent years, I met the people who, Bill Wilby from the who had the Millennium Arts Center, had the alumni of 1943 of Randall meeting every month in the building, which I thought was just so amazing that they had stuck together all that time. So I had a chance to talk to some of them, and I was really impressed. In those days, this is good for boys to hear. In those days, junior high school, children were 16 when they graduated, and they had vocational training. They learned to be cooks, they were printers, they were carpenters, they had different skills at 16, and that was the end of school. So many of them, when they graduated in 43, along came the war in 45, and they got jobs that they did very, very well. Many of them went on to college, became professionals of various sorts, and the idea of still meeting together is, I thought, really wonderful for them that they're doing that. And it was one of those people who told me about that she was the one who took her rope and walked the children up to the mall.
There's another notable person that I've heard of here, William Jefferson.
Let's talk about him. Louis Jefferson.
Louis Jefferson.
Yes. All right, I'd like to do that. In late 90s here in town, in the neighborhood, we started hearing about the fact that there was going to be that they were going to knock down the mall. They were moving EPA out of the mall and going to knock it down, and it would be empty. So we started a mall task force to talk about what the neighborhood thought should be kept what should be in that space. So we had quite a bit of conversation. Of course, nothing came of it. But in the meantime, the windows became more and more vacant over there. So I looked at those windows and I said, we should make some photo display in there. We should put up some history pictures. So I organized a history task force. We had quite a group. We had 15 or so people, including people from the fort and from the schools and from the neighborhood house and everywhere. And we had the history task force as part of the neighborhood assembly. So we gathered all those pictures together, and here we were with this wonderful assortment. We put them up, Southwest then and now. Well, about that, this was now about 2000, year 2000. So we realized that the Smithsonian was going to have their annual folk festival featuring D.C. So we said, well, why don't we have people come down and see our photos? So we got our photos in the program for the assembly, for the History Task Force pictures, and your jazz festival, and the same, and your chicken fish barbecue. And we had an opening meeting in the mall when they told about the pictures. Well, very strange, in that time, we met this woman named Irene Alexander. Well, it turned out that she had been asked to do some history on the Louis Jefferson family. None of the historians we'd been dealing with had ever mentioned Louis Jefferson. It was unknown to the local historians. So all of a sudden we had this story with all those pictures of Louis Jefferson. So right now, one of the things that I think would be really wonderful for you to do with your pictures and your getting people would be to quiz some of the residents, the older residents of Southwest, what they remember about Louis Jefferson and going on the boat rides. He had this have you read this stuff over there?
I've only heard of him that he was the first African-American millionaire.
Millionaire, right.
In the Southwest.
No, well, we're unclear whether it was Southwest or the whole of D.C.
Okay.
But he was definitely a major landholder down here on the road. You haven't read stuff in the mall?
Some of it, yeah.
Well, the thing about it is he started out as an orphan and stowed away on a ship when he was about 15 or something. And by the time he was 23, he was owning the boat. Seemed a little suspicious to us. But, and the rumor has it that the man who owned the boat line was actually his father. But it's unknown whether that's really true or not. However, he did own land down here. There's one of the papers up on the wall up there in the glass that tells about how he kept buying up land down on Buzzard Point. He had a stable and rented carriages, and from that he sold manure. He was an entrepreneur in every way and had many different occupations. So it's very interesting, the rumor that's spread that might be that he had this land. He had many children. I've forgotten whether it was 8 or 10, something like that. And the one that was the last one of the children had a caregiver. Well, the caregiver apparently was managing her finances as well, and maybe made off with quite a bit. So the grandson, who now is the keeper of the photos and the stories, is doesn't have the deeds to the property and thinks that they were dealt unfairly by Pepco and some others down there. But that's not on the board over there.
And that's one of his grandchildren?
Yes, Morrow.
Morrow?
Yeah. Morrow Trent. M-O-R-A-L Trent is his name. He was at the opening of our walk,
Okay.
our trail. So the History Task Force had this event, and right now we're starting over. Oh, well, I want to tell you what I want you to do about Louis Jefferson. Recently on TV, I saw a story about the early amusement parks. Now, Mr. Jefferson not only had the boat ride, but he had the park down the river, where the boat ride would take you down to the park. So many churches would use that as money raiser, organize a trip down the park, and they would get some money from that. So I think that it must be that, and I have talked to some of the people around, the old timers. They used to go down on the boat ride to the park. And I think it'd be wonderful to document that, have people tell about, in an oral history way, what they remember about the park and about going with the churches. And I think the place to start is the old-time churches, perhaps Second Baptist and Second Baptist Union would be the good ones. And I don't know whether Friendship did it too or not. But I think that to add to Louis Jefferson's story, I think to have a story of how the neighborhood enjoyed his boat ride and his park.
You're talking about a park that was on Buzzard's Point?
No, down the river.
Kings Point.
Way down.
Oh.
Like where the bridge is building.
Oh, way down there.
I think so. Uh-huh. But wouldn't that be a nice story to have?
Yeah.
Southwest Southwest plays.
On a picnic.
Yeah, goes on a picnic. Or Southwest's own amusement park. There was a white park and a black park. So
Tell us more about the History Task Force.
Well, the History Task Force got that, the photo display together. Then we heard that there was a coalition forming, a history coalition in the city under the auspices of the Chamber of Commerce. And one of the things they were doing was developing some history trails. So then we started developing a trail, and we hired a woman to be a writer. We had we selected the places around the neighborhood that would be the stops on the trail, and then the coalition, the history coalition, took over our work, our beginning, and edited it. Finally, got it off the ground just this last January. Were you there?
Yes.
Yeah, so you know. And so now that those wonderful booklets, I think, just remember some of the history for us, and are very good. So now, given the fact that once again the mall is threatened with demolition, we're working to get the pictures on digitalized, and then we'll be on our website. But we're also going to get some pictures, our hope is to get some pictures enlarged and put them in the library. We feel that they need to be in the library where people will see them, and that it will make people interested in early history. I would love it if children would come and see those pictures, and they would take the files that I started, right, so we could have a history of Margaret Amadon's school, a story, you know, so that the school children could work up some of these. Wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah. That'd be terrific.
Betty was the one who told me that you were doing oral history.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're going to interview Betty too.
Good.
I want to make sure we got a hold of you before you took off.
Well, I'm not leaving immediately.
That's good.
Let's see, that's just about where we are now.
Mm-hmm.
But
tell us a little bit more about the evolution of the neighborhood. I never knew that there were two separate civic organizations separated by race.
Mm-hmm.
We've always heard people say that 4th Street, 4.5 Street, was kind of
the dividing line.
A dividing line between race and class, with African Americans and working families living east of 4.5, and middle class people living west. Tell us about the neighborhood as you found it, and how it was grappling with those issues.
Well, the alleys existed over on this side as well. And one of the early things was there was this division, as I understand it, but there were also the alleys that built up. Now, one of the ones that I found, I just happened to see one that was called Willow Tree Alley. Have you ever heard of that?
No.
You know where the HHS annex is, where the Voice of America and those are? Mm-hmm. Well, that surround the two buildings with that wide road in between was all Willow Alley in the middle for a while. And I went to the Library of Congress to the map room and got an early map, and there it is. The outline is the major houses. Inside is the alley on two sides. Then you get the next map. Next map shows the inside cleaned out. Alley's gone. And it turns out it's a playground. So here was the playground, and in between, in the middle of this. Then the next one, of course, was wiped out in 1932. They wiped off the last of that to build the HHS. But that's the way it went. The first alley was Capitol Park, which is now Potomac Park, 800. That was very notorious. There were books written on the alley dwellings of Southwest. You've seen some of the stories of that. The story about the Mrs. Roosevelt was interested in improving the land, the lives of people down here. And others were interested, and they would invite the congressman down. Did you hear that story?
Yeah.
About the flies?
Yeah. Tell us anyway.
So they would invite the congressman down, and they'd see the privies, their outdoor privies a lot, and single faucets and so forth. And they would say to the congressman, now you know those flies are up there on the windowsill of your office. And they encouraged them to pass. There were the alley dwellings. I'm not very good on the early history.
Yeah.
They had an alley dwelling authority though, and cleaned up some of those.
Well, you know that documentary that was made, Southwest Remembered?
Sure.
Were you involved with that?
Yes. A little bit. Not much. I came in late.
That was a good piece.
It was very good. Yeah.
It was done in 1990.
Maybe that's when it was finished, but we had it,
Yeah.
we showed it at our event in 88.
80.
But, so I know that over here at Harbor Square, for example, you know that Harbor Square was the one area that was saved, that there were buildings saved from demolition.
Right.
And among those was Barney House.
Barney House.
Barney.
Oh, Barney.
You know about that?
I don't know where it is.
You don't know? You know the N Street goes over and then it goes down the hill to the Capitol, to Harbor Square.
Right.
The end house as you go down on your left was Barney House. I believe it was consisted of maybe 3 houses put together, and it was a settlement house. It was for white children, though. And the black children, the black women from public housing now have told me that they used to go and sit on the curb and watch the white children do the maypole dance, others. But also, the Southwest House for a while was partly located there.
Oh, it was?
So, but during the time they knocked down a lot of the cleared off things, they had tent cities down here. Did you know that?
No.
10 cities in this space where, next to where the fort is, going down there. I think Phyllis Martin lived in some of that. They used to have trailers, and the trailers were not very big. And so a family with a lot of children might have 3 or 4 trailers.
Right.
And then there was a shower building that had many showers. And the people loved that because they got a chance to see all their friends, and it was a big place to socialize.
Like a refugee camp.
Yeah, but it was enjoyable. The Southwest House has had several different locations. Roberta Patrick knows the history. You could ask her the history of that. Among others who know things is Herbert Holmes.
Okay.
You know him.
I know the name. I've never met him.
Oh, he's considered the baby of the Cavaliers.
Oh, okay.
Cavaliers, you know the Cavaliers?
Sure. I know Gene Washington. Is it?
I don't know him.
He comes to jazz a lot.
Oh.
We've had the Cavaliers as our guests.
Oh, uh-huh.
Yeah.
Well, they had, I think that now they're one of the early teams
Yeah.
that used to play. They'd play the Willow Trees. And I've ridden in taxis, and it turned out the driver used to be in the Willow Tree team. So they're still around, a lot of them. It's wonderful to have them around.
Right. It's kind of ironic that the current redevelopment plan that we have going on here still threatens the poor folk who live in this neighborhood. It's the way it did the last time.
Yeah. Right.
It just keeps repeating itself.
That's the world over, I think. That's too bad.
But there were a lot of other notable people who lived here. I heard that Marvin Gaye lived up by where I live.
Yes.
Like Carrollsburg and N Street.
Mm-hmm.
You know that?
Yes. That? And of course, Al Jolson.
Al Jolson.
And Denise Graves, I think.
Right.
Yes.
And Wiley Branton. He settled in Southwest.
Yes, yes, that's true.
Did you know him?
I met his son. I didn't know Wiley Branton. Right, I think so. Mm-hmm.
Wiley Branton was the lawyer who argued the case that resulted in the school desegregation, Brown versus Board of Education. He was the lawyer who argued the case for the plaintiff.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Well, let me get this right. He was the one who
Are you on
argued
this?
the case that resulted in Little Rock desegregation.
Oh.
That was separate.
Uh-huh.
Brown versus, maybe it was Brown that he argued. I don't know.
Right now, important precedent was set by a Southwest case, the case of it's somebody versus Berman, but it was in regard to the hardware store that used to be on 7th Street. The woman named Goldie Meyer. Goldie, that's not right. Goldie. That was her name. Goldie Snyder, I suppose.
Could be.
But she didn't want to have her lose her hardware store, so she sued. But they established the principle of eminent domain at that time. So Southwest, in a way, is current today's controversy.
Right.
Well, it's a wonderful place to live, I think. It's handy, and I think that the goal of all of us who are interested in this should be to work for that sense of community, that we're all in it together, and we should stick it out.
It's a wonderful neighborhood.
It is. And we have some wonderful people from the past left here that we're not appreciating.
That's right.
So that's about my story.
So what's the great lesson you've learned here?
It takes vigilance and hard work to try to reach out to people.
Yeah.
Oh, the one thing that's interesting now, of course, is that River Park, for example, had its 40th anniversary, their mortgage burning, just last year. And if you open up a new place, a lot of people come in around 40 years old.
Right.
And those people grow older. So that's what happened, and we have gone through a demographic transition now, with the older folks moving out one way or the other, and a lot of younger people coming in. We're starting over again. You saw the baby that went out.
Right.
And now the trick, in my estimation, is to get the people from the urban renewal area, the younger people who are moving in, to appreciate the folks who are here, and to develop that sense of community anew, because the ones from the old time who had that spirit, who had met people, are gone. And that we need to reach out and try to encourage the new people that they too can enjoy the history and the pleasures of this area. That's today's lesson.
Well said. Well said. What do you do in your leisure time, Margaret?
I read or I watch policy.
You do?
Yeah,
C-SPAN?
C-SPAN. For when I came here in 81, part-time and then full-time, I worked with the National Council on Family Relations. And when my husband was sort of there to be their policy person for them, but when he died in 88, I became the point person here in D.C. So I worked for them. I went to visit and worked with agencies and nonprofits, NGOs, on family issues, and tried to get people in my organization to become writers and letters to the editor and to become active in policy. And over the years we did encourage people to become much more policy aware than they were. So that was my other job.
What was your husband's name?
Harold Feldman.
Harold. And you said what was his field?
Family studies.
Family studies. Were you both professors in Ithaca?
Right. He was at Cornell.
He was at Cornell.
In the family studies program. And I was at Ithaca College in the psychology department.
Well, sorry he died as soon as he did.
Well,
You never really were able to put your retirement plan into full swing.
he worked here in policy from 81 when we came here first until 87 when he died. So he had that's what he wanted to do too.
Yeah. But you moved here permanently before he died.
Yes, just in 86 we actually bought the apartment.
Okay.
Yeah.
86. Almost 20 years.
It's incredible.
Well, thank you for your time.
Well, I'm glad to get it said, actually.
Right.
But I hope you can continue it. Ron McBee is eager,
Yep.
but I would love to have that have some material on the recreation, you know, with the car barn right here.
Right.
The kids know that. They don't probably. But the car barn right here, people would come down and walk to the wharf and get on the boat and go down to the amusement parks, the white and the black.
Where was the car barn?
Was Channel Square here.
Channel Square?
Have you noticed the rounded windows in all of the apartments?
Yeah.
Well, the car barn had a window like that. It was right here, and Riverside was the location of another one, and it was bought by a man named Chalk, and tore down the barn and made it Chalk House. That was the first name for Riverside. Actually, the trolleys and all were bought by this Chalk. I believe he was a GE franchise owner. Not GM. So he had the buses.
Right.
Do away with the trolleys, put in buses. Too bad.
All down 4.5 Street.
7th Street, too.
7th Street.
Mm-hmm.
Those were the only 2 streets that went through,
Yeah.
right? Did 3rd or
I don't
1st
think
ever
so.
go through?
I don't think so.